As we've been discussing this morning, the president gave an impromptu gaggle with reporters. He spoke for more than 15 minutes on a wide variety of topics. Here's some of what he had to say.
I think what he did was a disgrace. I think he goes down as the worst FBI director in history by far. There's nobody close. And I think I did the country a tremendous favor by firing him. A report yesterday, maybe more importantly than anything, it totally exonerates me. There was no collusion. There was no obstruction. And if you read the report, you'll see that. What you'll really see is you'll see bias against me and millions and tens of millions of my followers. That is really a disgrace. I am amazed that Peter Strzok is still at the FBI. And so is everybody else that read that report. And I'm not even talking about the report. I'm talking about long before the report. Peter Strzok should have been fired a long time ago. And, Scott's done a fantastic job at EPA, but
you don't see any problems with his ethical...
I'm not happy about certain things.
Is his job safe?
I'm not happy about certain things, but he's done a fantastic job running the EPA, which is very overriding, but I am not happy about it.
Sir,
I hate the children being taken away. The Democrats have to change their law. That's their law.
Sir, that's your own policy. That's your own policy. Why do you keep lying about it, sir?
That's the Democrats' law. We can change it tonight. We can change it right now. I think it's better to have Russia in than to have Russia out. Because just like North Korea, just like somebody else, it's much better if we get along with them than if we don't.
All right, one topic the president did not focus on during his time with the press today is the issue of tariffs. The White House announced today that it will impose a 25% tariff on $50 billion worth of Chinese goods.
So Alex Lawson joins us. He's a senior reporter for international trade at Law 360 to break this down. So the White House came out with this announcement earlier today. What does it really mean, though? How significant are these tariffs? It sounds like a big deal, 25%?
Yeah, I mean, and I should note you're having me on today to talk about a China fight. If you had me on any other day, we could have talked about a number of other trade things, such as the nature of U.S. trade policy. The tariffs are very significant. We've got a 25% levy on everything from like touchscreen products to medical devices, steel components, things like that. And it's more so even than just like the items that the tariffs apply to themselves. It's more of a policy maneuver. It's one of the most aggressive moves that Trump has taken against China yet. And that was, of course, a major campaign promise of his, you know, saying, I'm going to get tough on China. It took a while to sort of get the architecture in place for that to happen. And now it's going forward.
So how will these tariffs impact the Chinese economy? And more importantly, from our perspective, how, if China retaliates, will we be impacted?
Yeah, so it's twofold, right? I mean, tariffs, the argument against tariffs within the United States is that often, to the extent that it saves any jobs in our certain sectors, it always passes costs down to consumers because domestic manufacturers can then charge more for their products. But the other side, which is the point you just made, is about retaliation. The Chinese have already said they're lining up to tee up another $50 billion worth of tariffs on our products. For perspective, I think total U.S. exports last year were about $500 billion. So this is like 10%. This is not a small chunk of the U.S. economy. It's very significant. And often first against the wall, whenever the United States is hit with retaliatory tariffs, are agricultural products, because we make and sell a lot of food. And of course, that hits right to sort of flyover country in many states that voted for Trump. And so, you know, we'll have to see sort of how it manifests both in the midterm elections and during the next presidential cycle.
So China has already responded saying basically we'll meet your tariffs.
Yeah.
We see your tariffs and we'll match it, right? And we sort of talked about, is this a trade war? Vlad said it's an escalation at least, but what does a trade war look like? What does it mean?
Well, I saw that when I was backstage, and I agree with you. It's a little hobby horse of mine. I don't love the term trade war because it's always sort of like, it's kind of nebulous, doesn't mean anything. The term war has a very specific meaning. So, I mean, that's my one little thing. But regardless, it's a historic escalation of trade barriers. And it's not like we're talking about China, but it's not just with China. We've had fights with China before, and we've had sort of one-off fights with the European Union and Canada. Now that stuff, but never on this scale and never all at once is the issue. And so we're in largely uncharted territories, probably the largest escalation of barriers since about the 1930s when we were sort of plunged deeper into the Great Depression.
You know, the president says over and over again that we have unfair trade deals, that there's a deficit with that was his justification for tearing up NAFTA and other trade deals. Having a deficit with another country trade-wise, is that a bad thing or not?
Most economists will tell you it's really not the case, but that hasn't stopped the administration from using it as kind of like a North Star as it crafts its trade policy, because they see on a balance sheet, oh, we're spending more than we're making as we sell things to other countries. But it doesn't really work like a bank statement. The best way to think about it, you often hear as an analogy about a grocery store. The idea is like you spend a bunch of money at the grocery store, but the grocery store doesn't give you any money back. You have a trade deficit with Whole Foods or Fairway or whatever it might be. Of course, the difference is you get products for your money. The same goes for people and companies who are buying products from other countries. It's not just because we didn't get money back from them doesn't mean we're sort of on the edge of economic disaster. But like you say, the Trump administration has kept on sort of honing in on that figure and saying this puts us in a very bad place economically, and they're continuing to craft policy based on that.
That last point is a very interesting one, and it's one that doesn't get talked a lot about because they, frankly, in other networks, they don't have time to do deep dives on subjects like this. But it's critically important to point out that what you just said there, the idea that, look, the United States is the big kid on the block. We know historically that we are sometimes going to get screwed, to use the president's words, on trade. In return for that, we've established alliances. We've established democratic, like-minded countries, and the like NATO and the G7 and things that have come about because the United States has said, we're going to have to sort of like suck it up because we want these things to work, because if the world isn't a good place, then we are in a good place.
Well,
that's what Trump is doing. Yes, he's right about getting screwed sometimes by other countries, but destroying these alliances or doing away with them or criticizing NATO just because you don't like the trade practices, that could have real far-reaching effects that we're not even clear on right now.
Yeah, I mean, it takes a while for sort of the economic ramifications of tariffs to take root, but from a strategic standpoint, like you were saying, it's very interesting. I mean, presidents of both parties have gone after China on trade, and it happens all the time. But often we've, like you say, we built alliances based on that. We go with the European Union or Canada or Mexico, because companies in many countries have complained about Chinese policies that they don't care for. And we go together and we sort of apply diplomatic pressure, and that's often been enough. But now, the president is moving forward with tariffs on allies as well, and it's sort of like if a guy gets into a fight in a bar and his friend comes to help him and he turns around and punches his friend in the face. That's sort of where we're at on this. And that's been sort of the new blueprint for trade policy now.
I mean, we are bigger than any and more powerful than any other country on the planet. So, the president is exercising that power. Look, the United States is powerful. We shouldn't be able to, we shouldn't be afraid to use our swagger. The problem, I guess, or the challenge is going to be unknown. It's unknown at this point.
Yeah, I mean, there are many different ways to approach it. They've always said that they don't like these sort of diplomatic negotiations with China. Other administrations have tried that. We have like high-level summits either in Beijing or Washington, and sometimes problems get solved, sometimes they don't, but mostly the Chinese have made statements, not always followed through on their commitments, and he's sort of saying we're using these tariffs now as like a cudgel to enact more meaningful change. The problem is the Chinese have already said, whatever commitments we make to you, a while back they committed to purchase more like U.S. agriculture and energy goods at this big summit, and even Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, said the trade war is on hold. A week later, they went ahead with these tariffs anyway that were finalized today, and they said, well, those commitments are off. Like, we're not going to make those purchases anymore. So they're trying to thread this weird needle where they're still trying to negotiate at a diplomatic stage, but sort of holding a gun to their head with these new levies.
Alex Lawson, thank you very much.
Thanks.